All right, we did promise you rolling coverage. So once again, let's take you back live to Nasrec, where we are tracking the latest developments at the 54th ANC Elective Conference, where voting is in full swing for the top 6 results that are to be announced anytime today. Let's throw over to Nasrec now.
Well, welcome to Nasrec, and thank you so much, Alicia. And it is, of course, to use the words of the legendary Manchester United gaffer, Sir Alex Ferguson, squeaky bum time here at Nasrec, because it's only a few hours before we know who the new leadership, the top 6 of the African National Congress will be. And thanks so much for joining us here on SABC, and of course joined by my co-presenter, Aldrin.
Good afternoon. It's day 3 of the ANC's elective conference, and according to the program, you should have known by yesterday already who the top 6 officials of the ANC would be, but because of the delays starting from day 1 up until this very moment, we understand that there's still verification around the results. As soon as those results are out, of course, we will be carrying the announcement of the results live here on SABC, as well as on the SABC website, as well as on the YouTube channel. We'll also be tweeting away those numbers and, of course, making sense of it all with our analysts. But starting off with what has transpired today, of course, earlier on we heard from Gwede Mantashe, as Alicia has indicated as well, that Gwede Mantashe said his final goodbye. And just before I introduce the analyst who will be unpacking Gwede Mantashe's legacy as well, let's just take a quick listen to what Gwede Mantashe has to say. And he did indicate that there's no parting short. He would be coming back, probably as chairperson of the ANC. Let's just take a quick listen.
Thank you very much. I don't think this is a media briefing per se. It's actually a gathering with you as journalists. Express my appreciation of the time I spent with you. Difficult times, sometimes you ask questions that the intention is clear to put me in the corner. I will miss that. I make a commitment that once a new Secretary General is elected, I will bring him here and introduce him to you. How you deal with that new Secretary General is not my business, really. But I will give you that new Secretary General. I will bring that, sir. You will allow me to do that. Because if I don't do that, it will be like missing on duty and therefore just disappear, and you all say, where did this man go? I will bring that new Secretary General, and anybody who phones me, I will tell you that why do you phone me? I introduce the new Secretary General to you. Thank you very much. It was nice working with you, difficult sometimes, tense in some moments, but we enjoyed all the time. I always tell people that somebody who taught me something about politics much earlier in life said, never fight the media and never fight the church. Those are old institutions in society. I'm keeping to that. I don't have time to fight the media and fight the church. I don't have that time. Even when people drag us through the mud, we stand up and go on. The run-up to this conference was particularly difficult.
Indeed, Sakina, sometimes very tense interactions with Gwede Mantashe. Samson Gwede Mantashe, as Zizi Kota said earlier on. I also thought that Zizi Kota was going to shed a tear during that press briefing.
I thought Gwede was going to cry as well. But, you know, I think what was evident today was just that wonderful relationship that he shared with the media. And as he said, sometimes, yes, it got tense, but it is in the nature of things. But throughout, it is a relationship that remained cordial.
Well, certainly. Let's bring in the analysts and ask them what they make of this. We have Obusi Kaba, analyst from Monash, as well as Melanie Fervur. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been a long one. We've, of course, been waiting for the results, but let's first start with this one over here. Gwede Mantashe saying his final goodbyes. And, of course, you guys have been following the news and all the interactions that he's had with the journalists. What do you make of those final remarks?
Well, it is, vintage in a way, Gwede, isn't it? He, exactly what we know him to be. There's the jokes, there's the kind of needling at the journalists, and then there's the long philosophical answers when he doesn't so much care to answer the question directly.
Sometimes you don't understand what he means.
And half the time we go, what did he say now? I think one of my favorites recently was when he said, when people asked him quite directly, so the BGMs, has the deadline now been moved from Wednesday? We hear it, and he says, I don't know where people come with this thing that the deadline's been moved. The deadline is tomorrow, Wednesday, but we will let it run into the weekend. And then we also retain the right as the ANC to be a bit flexible on that, as not to exclude anybody. And I thought that was such a brilliant way of dealing with the question, But he was adamant there was no extension of the deadline.
Yeah.
And I do think, he's been, of course, he's been the Secretary General for the last 10 years. I actually had to go back and go, who was before him again? And of course it was Kgalema.
Yeah.
We've almost forgotten what it was like to not have Gwede as SG. And I think therefore people will miss him. The media will miss him. There is a sort of this love-hate fondness between the two parties, and that's a very tricky thing to manage for any political party, that issue with the media.
And between him and Julius, we now have to say thank you so much for the word mandash, because now it is a verb. Pabusi, your take?
My take, look, I think he's done exceptionally very well. I'll give you an example. For instance, he's been the SG, in essence, he's been the engine running the machinery. He's the engine running the car and keeping it going. Although I'll reserve my negative comments for now, I'll just do the compliments first. And he's been very well articulate in terms of saying the ANC constitution, because you realize, there's realization that ANC officials themselves don't really know the constitution. And I think Gwede has been the one key person that you could just listen to or hear, but he really knew it off by heart, which for me was very impressive in terms of guidance. Yesterday, a top official, which was even one of the questions they asked, something that's contradictory to what the Constitution says. And for me, that's alarming, because it means that there is no proper education in terms of understanding the Constitution, which is ultimately the governing document for the ANC itself. So he's done exceptionally well, and he's been very, had a good relationship with media. And I suppose at times I could not understand what he was saying, but obviously that's just the other side of it. And I do wish that now the downfall or the flip of it is that I wish he had taken more strong sense on issues. He's been, if he had voiced his opinion and not come out and just sort of be evasive of what's happening within the ANC itself. I feel like he's been running away from issues. He hasn't been, the spine is not extremely strong.
Yeah. But arguably, Malani, he has been Secretary General of the ANC at its most difficult time. Periods before, and we don't know what's to come, but up until this point, the last 10 years has been terribly harrowing for the African National Congress.
Yes, and I think this is the difficulty for Gwede Mantashe when he looks back at his legacy as SG, is that it was on his watch that a lot of these things have happened. A lot of the ill discipline in the ANC that has grown, a lot of the problems that they are quite willing to acknowledge now, both him and the president inside the ANC, this breaking up of branches, the reduction in membership size. And one can't blame it directly on him, because, it is part of liberation movements getting to a sort of age of 20 years. It was always going to happen and always going to be a challenging time. But the point is, he was the man who was supposed to be running the organization, keeping it intact. And it is on his watch. And I have to say, and I've said it before, but it is most probably the reason why he's been so anxious to have a successful outcome from this conference, whatever the outcome might be, but that the conference goes down successfully. Because the last thing he wanted yet again on his watch, was that this conference fails, that the first sort of time a big conference of the ANC fails completely. And so, yes, I mean, I'm sure his legacy will go down as a fairly mixed legacy. And yes, that he, you know, we joke about the Mantashe thing, but it's what you're referring to as well, Busi, is that fact that on one hand, one thinks he's going one way and he's criticizing, but then the next day you're not so sure anymore. Is he still going the same way, and is he still critical of what's been happening? And I think that is most probably one of the frustrations that people have had with him for whatever reason that he does that.
And he stayed true to form right up to the end in the organizational report that was delivered. And I think we'll unpack that as we move along.
Yeah. And you know, speaking about his tenure as Secretary General, and of course speaking about the issue around discipline, for the first time did we see ANC members marching outside the headquarters of Luthuli House. And many have been saying that the ANC is in the state that it is in because of Gwede Mantashe, that Gwede Mantashe has failed in his duty, as some may say, that he is the CEO of this party, and he has failed to hold people accountable. Busi?
It comes to mind the one example when it was reported that, you know, the president, through the Guptas, with the Gupta allegation, etc., and he said, you know, he will deal with it. Everyone who has had this situation, like in SABC Jonas, should report it to him. I'm not sure, I did not follow up on that, but I'm not sure how he dealt with it. But I think it will be unfair also to blame it on the one man. I don't think it's entirely up to him to deal with all these issues and factors. There's an entire top 6, I mean 6 of them as a National Working Committee and 86 of them as an NEC. So I don't think it's purely just him alone.
Actually, speaking about the issue around state capture, because it was he announced that that there will be this committee that will be set up within the ANC after the Jonas revelation, and they were welcoming all those people who have evidence, especially members of the ANC, to come forward. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't come forward. But they went to the public protector, and they were willing to speak to the public protector about some of these allegations. And one then wonders whether those members within the ANC believe that they cannot trust Gwede Mantashe and this process or this platform that he has set up.
For me, I think it's purely the factions are deeply entrenched within the ANC. It's difficult for me to report something to Gwede Mantashe just in case it's used against me on the other hand. So I suppose, you know, it was very difficult for people to approach him. So clearly there's a trust deficit. We cannot avoid that.
And how can they not be? You know, when we heard what the president said in his speech about ANC people talking out, you know, it is true that people are saying, you know, inside you can be free to say what you want. And that was most probably true, you know, until sort of Thabo Mbeki's time, where people started getting nervous, you know, where people felt that they couldn't really feel, and you know, you could see that, for example, in the parliamentary caucus, which I was part of. In Madiba's years, there was really free debate, really. Madiba also went there and he said, I would like to hear what you think. And so the president came in and said, I'm not addressing you. I want you to ask your advice, comrades, on this issue. Then Thabo Mbeki came, and then things started changing already a little bit, you know, where people started, there was much more of a fear culture crept into the ANC. He would address the caucus far more than really, you know, ask the caucus for opinions. People didn't feel the same extent of, and it's often to do with the people around them rather than the individuals themselves. People felt that the people around Thabo Mbeki was watching them, listening to them, you know. So already remember, and Andrew Feinstein wrote about this very well in his book After the Party, what happened around the AIDS debate in Parliament. By the time that Jacob Zuma, I wasn't in Parliament then anymore, but by the time, as I understand it, that Jacob Zuma became president, that kind of freedom, apart from the fact that he didn't come to caucus often anymore, that kind of freedom started disappearing completely. So there is this fear that even though the ANC says, let's talk freely, let's be critical, let's consult, ultimately there's something comes back to you, you know, on this. And particularly when people feel it affects the president, you know, so it's not just talking about procedural issues or other comrades on branch level, it's when they feel I mean, they were actually asked to talk out against the president, and that's what they didn't trust, you know. And also because Gwedi is also protecting him, and he has to in a way, but he has been protecting him even still now in that in the report of yesterday.
Absolutely, because you look at state capture, just staying with that theme for a moment, and how the report characterizes that. Rather than a reality, the report refers to it, you know, as people having strong views. You know, it's a debate, this concept of state capture, and also talking about it almost being a figment of the imagination of the media and those who benefited under apartheid. So that is quite curious, I would think.
That is curious. That is very peculiar, because I think there's also this great attempt to put on a facade of unity, a facade of we are united, and also PR. You know, there's also just the element of good public relations that, you know, we are great, the brand ANC must not be tainted. So he, without a doubt, has really had a difficult job. And but, you know, sometimes as a leader, you must really just bite the bullet.
Well, let's just quickly go to my colleague Mzwai, who's outside with the Premier of the Northern Cape, Sylvia Luka, and then after that we'll unpack the organizational report that was delivered earlier on. Mzwai?
Thank you very much, Aldrin. Indeed, I'm with, I want to say the Premier, but she did remind me earlier that she is here as a branch delegate from the Rosedale branch in Uppington. But nevertheless, she still remains the Premier. But let's start with your duty here as a branch delegate. Ms. Lucas, are you happy with the proceedings so far?
I think the conference is going extremely well. And despite all the delays and so on, we as ANC cadres have learned to be very patient, because we know sometimes processes can be cumbersome. And that is why I must say I'm fairly satisfied that the conference is going very well.
In terms of the issues that are being discussed here, I know the focus has been more on leadership, but there are policy proposals which you will have to adopt as this collective. What are the key areas that the Northern Cape would like to see come out of this?
What I can say is that we will fully participate in all the commissions, and I will make sure that I go to the commission that my branch would want me to go to make a fruitful input. That is why I'm not going to elaborate on any policy position, but what we will make sure is that our delegates, and even myself as a delegate, will make sure that I have full participation in the commissions, and from the commissions, the resolutions that will be taken will be policy that will be binding on all of us.
The Northern Cape nominated overwhelmingly the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, as a province, and I'm not sure what your branch, because I know there were a few branches that had a different view. Would you like to share that with us?
I actually didn't come for that. I came for a specific purpose, and that is, as a woman, I think with all the things that's being said around the whole conference business, the nominations, the different candidates, what we as South African women are forgetting here is that we are making history. For the first time, the ANC and the delegates of the ANC conference is acknowledging that we've got capable female cadres that can be candidates for the presidency. And that is what actually, because if you listen to everything that are being said, the whole thing that is so important for us as women is the acknowledgement that we are getting for our contribution, not only to the struggle, not only to the ANC, not only in society, but the acknowledgement that we are getting for our contribution as women and mothers of the nation. Because Nkosazana is being portrayed very different through the media. And that is not the issue. The issue is that where does it leave us as women if we don't say, hi, something great is happening. The presidency of the ANC have got candidates that are women. And that means the ANC now has matured.
So basically, Premier, whether she wins or she doesn't, in your view, you've already broken the ceiling.
We have broken the ceiling. That is exactly what I just said to someone that I spoke to. Whether she win or she lose. We have broken the ceiling, and I want South Africans to acknowledge that the ANC that is being seen as a patriarchal movement, many people say the ANC is still in the past, but the ANC is the most progressive movement because we as the ANC have produced women of caliber that can be today candidates for presidency.
Indeed. But maybe a bit of, I don't know whether to call it contradiction. How come in the provinces we hardly see women contesting for provincial chairpersonship, yet you are able to go for the highest?
I don't think I want to elaborate on that because of my own experience. I contested this year as a female for the position of chairperson of my province. The issue is that is why I thought we must come and break the perception that women are not capable. And that is the reason why I said, as a woman looking at all the things that are being said through the media, I must just come to the media and say one thing to the South Africans out there. Appreciate the fact that women are capable and ready and that we have broken the glass ceiling.
So are you confident Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma will emerge?
Even if she doesn't emerge, she made history. That is the most important thing.
You will accept gracefully the outcome of whoever?
Fair processes of the ANC make you to gracefully accept outcomes, whatever. But it will not take away from the fact that thousands have acknowledged that we can as women.
From here, where to?
From here, where to?
In terms of women advancing their cause, because you've already shown that you can go for the highest. So
exactly.
Where to now?
There is no limits to what women can do. And I hope this conference is sending that message out to the women of the world that there is no limits to what women is capable of.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That was Premier Sylvia Lucas, who actually is the Premier of the Northern Cape. She's a woman herself. Indeed, she's saying women have made history. For the first time, a woman is contesting the presidency of the ANC, which is quite a feat.
Well, that was Mzwayi Mbeche speaking to Sylvia Lucas, there, the Premier of the Northern Cape. But interesting that she talks about women and breaking that glass ceiling. Interesting because Melania, and I don't know if you were there, Mahikeng, 1997. Winnie Madikizela, there was a nomination from the floor. And of course, we know how that played out. I think she said she was taken by surprise, asked for the proceedings to just adjourn momentarily so she could consult. And then Thabo Mbeki was chairing. You know, you were probably, you were there.
I wasn't there, but I remember it.
You
I was
remember
overseas
that?
at the time as ambassador, yes. But I mean, you know, first of all, what's interesting, of course, is Sylvia Lucas there because she's supporting Dlamini Zuma, but the Northern Cape province was something like 97% Cyril Ramaphosa. So already you can see that tensions that's there. That's interesting, first of all. Now, I have to say, you know, I mean, it is true what she's saying. One can't deny that the ANC has been a deeply patriarchal organization, like our society is. Even though the ANC has from the start had quotas for women in Parliament the first time, that's why Parliament have such a lot of women, and have really tried and have been pushed by the Women's Lobby, not only the Women's League, but also the women in the ANC generally, you know, to get equality in terms of representation very quickly. Very far from it, of course. And also if we go back and look at the possibilities now of the two top sixes, bit thin on the women's side, you know, whatever the outcome is going to be, it's going to be thin, you know, and particularly if it's the Cyril side, then it's going to be very thin on the gender side. And I have to say, I was worried about a tweet that Fikile Mbalula sent out last night after he'd voted for Dlamini Zuma, he declared. And he then says, I have just voted for the mother princess, is a woman, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. I stand behind all women. And I go, as a feminist, I'm not quite sure that using the words as a mother and a princess, you know, when you're describing a possible presidential candidate, that is actually appropriate from your Minister of Police. I think that in itself, for me, there is patronizing language, certainly gender insensitive language there. So it's kind of ironic. And I think, yeah, we still have a long way to go. And Sylvia's interesting what she's saying. on more than one level, also because her province herself didn't support a woman.
But even when you look at the organizational report from the SG, this issue around women has been an issue that has been ongoing. But there's this small paragraph in the organizational report speaking about women, but more specifically speaking about the Department of Women. And that's another thing, that what has this department been able to do? One can make the argument that the idea of having a department that focuses on issues relating to women would be great. But has that department even been able to deliver on that mandate?
Yes, there's an entire department dedicated to women. I think women within the ANC have not spoken as a collective. And for me, I find that problematic. I would not, by virtue of being a woman, want to be forced to vote for a woman just because of being a woman, obviously. But I mean, there's a lack of collectivity that is not happening. At one instance, we had the ANC Women's League saying that we're not ready for a female president. Just some years ago. So that's contradicting messages, and there's this continuous support for the male to project that power. And you've seen this with the rape cases, for instance, and you've seen this coming out on numerous occasions. I think that even the department is, slightly toothless at this moment. We've seen it play out with a lot of things that have happened, but it's toothless because they kind of take that secondary position where they do not want to project their opinion and come out as a collective. So for me, that's problematic. I think politics takes precedence, or it's the driving force behind everything, behind real, genuine issues that touch on women.
It's not just the ministry, of course, it's also the Women's League, and we'll come back to that. Just a quick update on what is happening here at Nasrec. We see journalists being escorted now there will be an open session at plenary, and hopefully this will signal the announcement of the election results of the top 6, and the excitement building at this stage, Aldrin.
Well, definitely. Hopefully at some point we get the results, if that is happening today. Let's just keep with the theme around the organizational report. Just quickly want to go back to a clip from earlier on where Gwede Mantashe was briefing the media, and he spoke about prospects for the ANC leading up to the 2019 elections, because one thing that we need to take into consideration as well is that this elective conference is not just an elective conference about electing new leaders, but it's also about policies, as well as what would be the foundation of a manifesto that we'll be seeing in 2019. And let's just take a quick listen to what Gwede Mantashe had to say about 2019.
The reason that we call National General Council, we convene policy conference, we come to the national conference, all those are efforts to re-strengthen the organization. Where we have lost ground, we want to regain the lost ground. Now, anybody who asks us the question, what are the chances in 2019? Actually, is that we're working for regaining the lost ground. As we saw in the local government elections, we want to regain that. We don't want to be relegated into a rural party. We want to regain the metros and want to be a strong ANC. So anybody who asks the question, whether 2019 you have doubts or not, we can't have doubts about 2019. We must work hard to win them well and increase our support, improve from where we were in the 2016 elections. In other words, in the theme of the organizational report was that the ANC has a duty to recover a new growth trajectory. And if it doesn't recover that, there will be problems going forward. Like any other organization, every organization, it doesn't matter what organization, grows, peaks, matures, and when it matures, it stagnates and it declines. If it doesn't have a new growth trajectory to kickstart new growth, it actually declines to disappearance. And we're aware of that. We're looking into it all the time. We talk about it. We're not hanging our hands in the air to say, come the end of life, let's finish ourselves off. That is not what we're doing. We want a better ANC because a better ANC is good for the country.
Well, the Secretary General outgoing Gwede Mantashe there, and at least the ANC not oblivious to the problems that they are facing. But then again, they seldom have been. But talking there about, you know, this trajectory, the new trajectory that they need to embark on. And where do they start, though? You know, when it comes to membership, of course, we see there's been an increase in membership from the organizational report, some 200,000 plus once again. So bringing the ANC membership to just below 1 million again, just 900,000 plus the membership standing at the moment. I think it was 958 somewhere there, thousand members that they now have. But that's interesting because in the lead up to conference, there is usually more activity at the branch level, and therefore it's no surprise therefore that the membership would increase. But will that translate into a better performance at the polls, Busi?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because I think post this conference, you know, there's still the cleaning up that needs to happen. And they only have a very short space of 2 years. How are they going to convince the voters at home that the ANC is still, you know, representing their interests? There's so much that has tainted the image of the ANC for me, and you know, I simply find it very difficult. I think there's also a lack of the whole self-correcting. I don't believe in that. I think if there's no way that you are able to self-correct. There should be serious measures taken against corruption, against state capture, to convince the voter at home. And if you look how they lost the key metros, you know, it's not necessarily that people voted for opposition parties, but maybe they stayed away because there's this trust deficit that, you know, I don't believe the ANC any longer represents my interest or holds me in the forefront. The SASA debacle, for me, that's a huge issue. It touches on the daily lives of people. You cannot mess that up. How are you going to make that up and still maintain the same minister in the same position, and she keeps underperforming, you know?
And that's the problem. Let's just quickly see if we can get visuals from the plenary that's currently open to the media. Let's see if we can get those visuals to understand that the Secretary General is